This story was sent to me over the weekend. And as you will learn, her husband supported her in every way he could. Turns out she was cheating on him, but he had the last laugh. Let's go. My wife and I have been married for 14 years. I am 48 and my wife is 47. When I met her, she was a waitress at an all-night diner, but she always had dreams of working in finance or the banking industry, but she could never break ground in that field. So when we met and we started dating, I learned of her goals. I told her that I would do everything in my power to help make those dreams come true. So with a lot of dedication from both of us, she eventually got a job as a finance manager at a local bank. It was a great position for her and it paid very well, but she did not start as a finance manager. She had to work through a few of the positions at the bank, which in turn made her a more well-rounded manager. As the years went by, her salary kept increasing by leaps and bounds until it grew to, well over $100,000 per year. Way more than what I was making. I am a manager for an automotive shop and I don't come close to that. I was making about $48,000 per year, but I still helped her out financially with student loans so she could continue her education in her field. She wouldn't have any money left to pay her bills when she first started working at the bank. Many years ago, when we first started dating, I would give her a couple of $100 here and there to make sure she could pay her rent and other bills on time. Eventually she was doing so well that she didn't need my help anymore and she was able to pay off all of her student loans, and she even offered to help me out financially, but I declined because I didn't need it with both of us making good money. We went on vacations, traveled to different countries, and even took a few of our friends with us on vacation and paid for them to join us. Things were really looking good. By this time, we had been dating for about 4 years before we got married. She didn't have any kids. I had one son from a previous relationship and he was on his own. So it was just the two of us. But things started to slowly change. About a year ago, she became distant. She was working longer hours and she was always tired when she got home. I understood. So I tried to take the pressure off her by cooking for her and cleaning the house. When I got home, I always got home before she did. So I had time to put in a little housework before she walked through the door. But it seemed like the more I did to help out, the more she wanted me to do, and she would always find something else that needed to be done. So I started to feel like I was never doing enough again. I just made a mental note for the next time, but I started to notice that she was spending more money buying new clothes and going out to lunch with her friends more often. I didn't put too much thought into her spending money on clothes. I just figured she wanted to make a good impression on her subordinates and the big boss. About a year ago, I really started seeing a slight shift in her behavior. She was more agitated with me and she would snap at me for the smallest things, and I just talked it up to stress from work. I knew she was under a lot of pressure. So I tried to be understanding and supportive, but no matter what I did, it seemed like it was never enough. Then about 6 months ago, she started working even longer hours. She was never home, and when she was home, she was always on her phone or working on her laptop. I asked her what was going on and she just brushed me off and said she was fine, but I could tell something was wrong, but I didn't want to cry too much. So I just left it alone, thinking she would come to me when she was ready to talk. But her behavior started to get worse and she started talking down to me like I was beneath her, and she even started calling me names. I had never seen this side of her before and I didn't know how to deal with it. So I just tried to ignore it, thinking she would eventually snap out of it. But one day, about 3 months ago, I came home from work and she was already home and she was on the phone and she was yelling at someone. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could tell she was angry. So I just went to the kitchen to start dinner. After a few minutes had passed, I went back into the living room and told her I was starting dinner. She said she wasn't hungry and she said she was going to bed. I didn't want to argue with her, so I just let her go. But I couldn't help but wonder what she was so angry about. Fast forward a few days, and I get a text from my wife as I am driving home saying she would be working late. I replied and said, okay, her meaning of working late is working until 7 to 8 p.m., but on this night, it was way past 9 p.m. and she wasn't home yet. So I decided to drive up to the bank where she worked and her car wasn't there. So I thought maybe she had gone to hang out with her friends and didn't say anything to me. But she would always tell me she was going to hang out with her friends or coworkers. But she didn't this time. So I started to get worried and I called her phone but she didn't answer. So I left her a voicemail asking her to call me when she got a chance. She never called me back, and while I was driving home, I was hoping she would text me or something, but that didn't happen at about 1:30-ish. She come strolling in and went straight to the shower without saying anything to me. At this point, I was angry after she got out of the shower. I confronted her and asked why in the hell did she not tell me she was going somewhere after work and not return my calls or text messages. She fires back and says, look, I was just hanging out with some of my friends and coworkers, and then she says, I need to stop trying to control her. I said to her, excuse me? Really? I then said, okay, walked off and went to sleep in the guest bedroom. The next morning I went to work without saying anything to her. Not one word, and she didn't say anything to me the whole day. No apologies. Nothing that set off alarm bells. The fact that she did not apologize for failing to communicate with me was enough for me to be suspicious. Plus, I knew something was going on with her. I just didn't know what it was. So I decided to do some snooping around and see if I could find anything, but I didn't want her to know I was snooping. So I had to be careful. I started going through her things when she wasn't home, and I found some strange things like credit card statements with charges that didn't make sense and hotel receipts. But I still didn't have any concrete evidence that she was doing anything, and I couldn't accuse her of anything. But I did find something else that would give me something of interest. I found a notebook with what looked to be a list of names, phone numbers, and dates. At first I thought it was just a list of her friends or something. But then I noticed there were some men's names as well. So I decided to call one of the numbers on the list, and it turned out to be a hotel. I asked the person on the phone if they could tell me if this person had stayed there, and they said they cannot give me that information due to privacy reasons. But I asked the person on the other end if they could check and see if the person had checked out, and they said they could not give me that information either. So I was thinking to myself, why would my wife have a list of men's names and phone numbers in her notebook with dates next to them? After seeing that, I just knew she was cheating on me. I didn't need to ask any questions. So I just packed up my things and left and stayed with a longtime friend of mine. I conferred with my friend and told him what I found. He said that names and dates don't amount to much, but I said something is going on and I need to find out what it is. I was going for 2 days and I didn't hear anything from my wife. So I decided to hire a private investigator. I didn't have time to keep wondering what she was doing. Plus, she was angry when I confronted her about not communicating with me. And the fact that she had names and dates solidifies something was going on. So on day 3, I decided to call a private investigator to see what he could find out. I gave him my wife's name, where she worked, some of the friends I knew she hung out with, and some other information, and he said he would get right on it. The next day, the private investigator called me and said he had some information for me but wanted to meet in person. So we set up a meeting. He showed me footage of my wife leaving work with a few of her coworkers. They all left in separate cars. Then they went to a fancy restaurant and they all had dinner. On one occasion, the private investigator noticed my wife reaching in her purse and texting someone. About an hour later, everyone was done with dinner and everyone walked out of the restaurant, including my wife. Everyone left except my wife, who stayed behind and waited in her car. About a half hour later, a car pulls up next to hers. A guy gets out, walks over to my wife's car. She gets out and they embrace and they start kissing. After they embrace and kiss, they get into their vehicles and drive to a hotel. That's about 30 minutes away. They get out and walk past the front desk as if they already had a room. The private investigator gave me the footage and said he would continue to follow them. But I had seen enough. I didn't need to see any more. The only thing I wanted to do now was get out. So after getting the footage, I called a lawyer the next day. We reside in New York, which is a false state and a no-fault state. That much. He did tell me right away. I gave him the footage of my wife kissing another man and going to a hotel afterwards. He filed for divorce on my behalf and I told him to go after everything. Alimony, retirement, anything I could get. As the days go by, I rarely talk to my wife. I only went back to the house to get more things when she was not home, and the big stuff I put into storage. Fast forward 3 weeks and my wife is served with divorce papers at her job. And the only thing she communicated to me was I wasn't getting a dime from her. I didn't respond to her statement. I was just waiting for the divorce hearing and showing the court the evidence at the divorce hearing. My lawyer went for the jugular. We went for alimony, retirement, and anything my lawyer could get anyway. After it was all said and done, I got $1,700 per month in alimony for 6 years. I wasn't able to get more because of the money I was making at my job. As far as the house, we didn't own it. We were renting it. We had a condo that we sold just over a year ago after the hearing was done. I never saw my ex-wife again. I didn't care. I was enjoying the passive income. She was giving me. Her cheating cost her over $100,000. Over the 6 years, she will finance my next house. I want to thank Tony for taking the time to share my story. It took me a long time to have the nerve to share this. Even after I did individual counseling, it took me some time to come to terms